I don't think many of you would disagree with the claim that the Six Flags Entertainment Corporation is in a bit of an interesting state at the moment. This post-merger reality certainly has a lot of positives for the chain and the theme park industry, especially here in the United States, but there's no doubt that there are also a lot of negatives. One of the most concerning trends across the chain is, of course, ride removals. Many major parks have seen coasters close in the last year or two, and in many cases, these were pretty major parts of those parks' lineups. So the question is, from a coaster standpoint, are the new coasters in the Six Flags chain outweighing the ones that are being removed? Is it a net positive, or is it a net negative, or does it meet in the middle? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk through every coaster in the Six Flags chain that's opening or has already opened in 2025. I then am going to use an incredibly subjective grading system where I will give each coaster 1 to 3 points. The bigger the coaster, the better the ride, and the more impactful for its park, the more points it will get. And if it's a really good fit, it can also get an additional point, bringing its total up to 4. We will then walk through all the coasters that have closed recently. These will also be awarded 1 to 3 points. The worse the loss, the more points will be awarded. These essentially are negative points. And with all that, we can see how some of these things are shaking out. So let's look at the new coasters first. Canada's Wonderland is set to receive Alpine Fury, a Premier Rides launch coaster. And I just gotta say, this ride looks absolutely incredible. A lot of inversions and some very unique elements. This coaster immediately earns 3 points because of the fact that this is going to be an e-ticket attraction at Canada's Wonderland. I also tend to believe that it is a very good fit here, so I'm going to give it an additional point, bringing it up to the max total of 4. Presuming everything goes well with this coaster, this should be the best Premier Rides coaster ever built. Let's go to Carowinds now for Snoopy's Racing Railway. This ride is actually a clone of the one up at Canada's Wonderland, which is why you're seeing a POV of that ride here. In terms of kiddie coasters, I think this is one of the better built ones you're going to find, but as it is just a kids coaster, I can't really give it more than a singular point. I still like this addition for Carowinds, but it's not exactly an e-ticket. King's Dominion finally has received their Volcano the Blast coaster replacement, and that is none other than Rapterra. This B&M Wing coaster is getting pretty solid reviews, and I also really appreciate what King's Dominion did with theming up the area around this attraction. The ride is solid, and I think the fit within its own park is solid, but not the best possible fit. So I'm going to give this 2 points out of the possible 3. It's been rumored that this replacement is going to be a wing coaster for such a long time, and it's really cool to see riders on this now in 2025. Six Flags Great Adventure has received Flash Vertical Velocity, a ride that they scooped up from another park that canceled the project. When you have that knowledge, it puts this ride into a little bit of a better perspective, because this coaster does not make a ton of sense at Six Flags Great Adventure due to capacity reasons. Its estimated capacity is significantly less than some of the other major coasters at the heavily visited Six Flags Great Adventure, so for that reason I can't give it 3 points, but as it's still a fun ride, I'll give it 2. Six Flags Great America is receiving Wrath of Rakshasa, a B&M dive coaster. To me, this is another good, not great addition, especially when it comes to the fit within the park. I think it's fine. These coasters have decent capacity and generally are good crowd pleasers, so 2 points for Wrath of Rakshasa. Moving on to Six Flags New England now, let's find Quantum Accelerator. Quantum Accelerator is a great addition to the park because they previously didn't have a launch coaster. I was going to give this coaster a solid 2 points, but with the great fit within Six Flags New England, we're going to bump that up to a total of 3. Last one is Six Flags Over Georgia's Georgia Gold Rusher. Now this was originally announced as Georgia Surfer before going through a complete retheme. I appreciate what they did here, and while this coaster isn't super well themed, it's definitely stylized and a huge step up from some other coasters in the chain. 2 points here, that's a total of 16 points. Let's go to the removed coasters now and talk about coasters that have been removed in the last 2 years, starting at Canada's Wonderland with Time Warp. The fans of this Zamperla Volare were few and far between. I don't think Canada's Wonderland is losing much here, and so I'm only awarding this coaster 1 point. Remember, for these removed coasters, the more points I award, the worse the removal is. Carowinds removed Nighthawk in 2024. It felt like this coaster wasn't long for this world for a very long time, and finally they decided to pull the plug. While there were many that did not particularly enjoy this coaster, there were some that did, and it was still a major attraction in Carowinds' ride lineup. For those reasons, 2 points awarded for Nighthawk. King's Dominion is finally moving on from their aerodynamics looping coaster Anaconda, and while this ride does have a fantastic location, I think it's a location that'll be better suited to a different attraction. Only 1 point awarded here. Now let's look at the Kid Flash Cosmic coasters. These were cloned rides added to Six Flags Fiesta Texas and Six Flags Over Georgia, and while the concept seemed incredible, these unfortunately did not work in reality. A ton of technical issues that unfortunately are to be expected for a Skyline coaster. I'm going to give 1 point to each, a total of 2. Six Flags Great Adventure took some of the worst blows, and of course, we can't forget about Kingda Ka. It's still a little hard to believe that this coaster isn't giving rides anymore. The world's tallest coaster is, well, safe to say, the tallest coaster in the world no more. This coaster absolutely earns a full 3 points, which is, again, for the removed coasters, not good. As if that wasn't worse enough, Six Flags Great Adventure also had to rip out the one and only Green Lantern. This B&M stand-up coaster wasn't nearly as well loved, but it was still a very major coaster in their lineup. 2 points awarded here. Next, we have Six Flags Magic Mountain and Superman Escape from Krypton. This coaster has had a lot of technical issues, and unfortunately, I missed my chance to ride it last March. Between long queue times and or ride breakdowns, we weren't able to make it work. I'll put it below Ka and give it 2 points. But this is yet another very famous coaster that has gone down in the Six Flags chain. Last one is Six Flags Over Texas and La Vibora. I don't think many of us were too terribly surprised to hear that this coaster was being removed. It was an old bobsled coaster that had been relocated. I know it's had its fans, but between capacity and age, it's not too surprising that Six Flags Over Texas decided to move on. Only 1 point earned here. Alright folks, if you've been tracking at home, we came to a total of 16 points awarded to new coasters in 2025, but I have to take away 14 points from coasters that have closed in the last 2 years. That's a net positive of just 2 points, which in this grading system equals about 1 coaster. You can say what you want about my point system and the subjective nature of it. The main reason I was using a system like this in this video was to prove the point that the new coaster additions are barely outweighing the removals at this juncture. You guys are smart. I think you can all see that that is a massive issue. The question, of course, becomes, was 2024 and to an extent 2025 just a bad sequence of events for the Six Flags Entertainment Corporation, or is it a sign of things to come? Among the coasters that were removed, there were definitely some pretty shocking ones. These were balanced out a bit, though, by some of those coasters that we've been expecting to be removed for quite a while. One thing is for certain, when you look around the Six Flags chain, there is still plenty of coasters that could potentially be on the chopping block. I think we will still see a couple of coasters removed in the near future, but at a slower rate than we've seen recently. It seems like they're looking at this from an ROI standpoint, return on investment. They're looking to see if the ridership of a coaster is ultimately worth it for the cost it takes to operate. Or if a coaster has just become too dang expensive like Kingda Ka evidently did, then they're going to pull the plug no matter what. I also want you to remember that this chain hasn't officially been a chain for a full year yet. The merger was complete on July 1st, 2024. So we no doubt have to keep that in mind. This is still a pretty new entity in the scheme of things, and I think in a lot of ways they're still figuring out how they want to move forward as a company. I think here in the first year or so, we're seeing a lot of growing pains throughout the Six Flags chain. But then again, we're also seeing a lot of things that are encouraging to see. I just wanted to be consistently positive across the board. Perhaps it's even silly to wish for something like that. There is going to be a lot of work that's going to need to be done to make this chain what we all hope it can be. The new additions, in my estimation, are barely keeping up with the ride removals. And if they keep removing rides at the same rate, it's going to be difficult. It is going to be very interesting to monitor in the next few years to see what happens with the coasters and the attractions and the parks of Six Flags. But I'll pass the mic over to you. Do you think that these new additions are outweighing the removed coasters? Give me your best read on the situation down in the comment section below.